Good morning to one and all. Welcome you all to the Daily Indian Express newspaper analysis for the date 3rd January 2024, brought to you by Ganesh IAS Academy. Okay, let's get into the today's newspaper analysis. So mentioned here are the list of articles which we are going to have the analysis in the upcoming slides. So have a look at it. Okay, let's get into the analysis of every article one by one. Government plans to end free movement regime along the international border with Myanmar. Due to certain internal security issues, government is planning to close the Manipur-Myanmar border with the smart fencing. This is what the news is about. Let's look into how the news has been related with examination. Under prelims, it is related with current events of national as well as international importance. Similarly, under mains, it is related to GS paper 3, internal security, under a subtopic called security challenges and their management in border areas, linkage of organized crime with terrorism. This is how the news has been related with the examination. Okay, let's look into the details of the news. So, as I said, the government is considering to end the free movement regime between the Myanmar with the Manipur because of certain internal security issues, and government is going to close the border with the help of smart fencing. And idea is not only to stop the insurgent activities but also break the influx of illegal immigrants that arises because of the Myanmar junta. And Manipur shares nearly 390 km of porous border with Myanmar, but only a certain portion, that is 10 kilometers, has been fenced. The border between India and Myanmar ranges to 1643 km across 4 states, that is Mizoram, Manipur, Nagaland as well as Arunachal Pradesh. This is very important from the perspective of prelims, as well as the free movement regime is mutually agreed between the countries of both the sides to allow the people to freely migrate to certain distance up to 16 kilometers. And FMR, that is the free movement regime, was implemented in 2018 as the part of India's Act East policy. So this is what the details of the news is. Let's look into what is the reason for the free movement regime to be implemented. Is to connect the people with the same cultures, those who are living in both the sides. So during early 1800s, that is during the British period, this border was demarcated without considering any ethical or cultural identity. So such border have been maintained till now. So their cultural as well as ethnic activities, which has been formed over thousands of years, have been separated because of the human-made border. So to overcome this, to connect the people with the same culture, this free movement regime was implemented since 2018. Secondly, it acts as impetus to the local trade as well as business, so that it will enable the people to sustain with their local livelihood, which in turn will generate a local economy, so that it will enable them to concentrate on other productive activities, apart from involving in the insurgent activities, which is very threatening from the internal security point of view. So this is what the reason for free movement regime. And what is the issues that has been raised because of implementing the free movement regime is there has been increased illegal immigrants. For example, the Kuki-Chin people who are living in the Myanmar-Manipur border have been suppressed by the Myanmar military, so that they were forced to migrate to the Manipur. And then secondly, increased porous borders led to activities like drug trafficking as well as gun running. And at the same time, the free movement regime enabled the insurgents to make a tent in the Myanmar side, so that they could act as the launch pad for the future attack on the Indian side. So these are all the internal security issues that has been arised because of the implementation of free movement regime. So this is what the thing is. So we could able to look into the map that this is the border of the this is the border between Myanmar as well as India. This is how it has been. Okay, let's look into what are all the border management activities that has been undertaken by India along the India-Myanmar border. See, the Assam Rifle, a dedicated paramilitary force, has been deployed to guard the Indian-Myanmar border, and secondly, highly advanced equipments like UAV, battlefield surveillance radar, and then laser range finders were used to secure the border. And at the same time, comprehensive border infrastructure projects were undertaken to improve the border infrastructure of Indian-Myanmar border, and then integrated checkposts at major entry points is also been implemented along the border to overcome such kind of illegal activities that is arising at the border areas. So these are all the border management initiatives that has been undertaken by India for quite some time. So what need to be studied further is we should know about what the northeastern maps, their geographical features, and then vibrant village scheme, what is the objective of the scheme, and who is the implementing authority of the scheme. Third is we should also be aware of the Assam Rifle, why they have been formed, and which are all the border areas they have been manning. These are all the things which we needed to be further aware of, and with this we have reached the end of this topic. Designated terrorist. So the news is related to designating a person as terrorist under UPA Act. So how the news has been related to examination is, under prelims the news has been related to current events of national as well as international importance. Similarly, under mains it is related to security challenges and their management in border areas, linkage of organized crime with terrorism. This is how the news is being related with the examination. Okay, let's look into the explanation of the news. Gangster Goldy Bragg, who is behind the murder of the Punjab singer Sidhu, was designated as terrorist by the Union government under UPA Act. Okay, then who is the terrorist? UPA Act doesn't define the word terror or the terrorist, but it defines terror act as any act being committed with the intent to threaten or likely to threaten the unity, integrity, security as well as economic security and sovereignty of India. So this is how it has been defined under UPA Act. The original act dealt with unlawful act related to secession, but the anti-terror provision was introduced only during 2004, and the recent amendment during 2019 was sought to empower the government to designate an individual as the terrorist. So this is what the evolution of the UPA Act is about. So how are individuals are declared terrorist? The center may designate an individual as terrorist through a notification and add their name to 4th schedule in UPA Act. If their name has been added to 4th schedule, means then they are designated as terrorist by government. Government is not required to give an individual an opportunity to be heard before such designation. Why it has been? It is based on the principle of the legal presumption of an individual being innocent until proven guilty. If an individual has been convicted in the terror case, means then it is the responsibility of him to prove that he is not guilty of it. So this is what the thing is. And what happens when an individual is declared as terrorist? After the designation of an individual as a terrorist by the global agency like United Nations, his travel will be banned, his assets will be freezed, such kind of restriction will be made on the particular organization or the individual. But in the case of UPA Act, no such provisions has been provided under the Act, and the amendment also give the center the power to remove the name from the schedule, and at the same time it also gives an opportunity for the person to file an application before the government, and they also have the right to seek a review within the 1 month of time period. So these are all the two ways how the person's name could be removed from the designation of terrorist. and then there is a third way, that is apart from these two way, there is another way, that is a person could able to approach the courts. So these are all the three ways under which a person's name could be removed from UPA Act. So this is what the details of the news is. What we need to study further is we should be aware of what is NIA Act and why it has been formed, and what is the structure of it. Secondly, we should also be aware of United Nations Security Council, its structure, function as well as the mandate, and then the paramilitary forces of India. So these are all the things which we needed to be further aware of, and with this we have reached the end of this topic. Staying in the lane. So the news is related to income as well as the expenditure of the government for the past 8 months. And how the news has been related to examination is, under prelims it is related to economic and social development. Similarly, under mains it is related to Indian economy and issues relating to planning, mobilization of resource, growth, development and employment. So this is how the news has been related to examination. So let's look into the details of the news. The Comptroller General accounts show that the first 8 months of this financial year, Union government's collection continued to grow at a fairly robust pace, and then the gross tax revenue grew at 14.7% for the past 8 months, and at the same time government spending is also higher than the projected the budgeted projection. And then this is the data related to the gross tax collection. In terms of direct tax collection, it also grew at 25% due to healthy corporate balance sheet and also healthy payment of the personal income tax by the individuals. And then at the same time, GST also averaged 1.66 lakh crore for this financial year, which is up from 1.5 lakh crore over the previous financial year, that is 2023. And at the same time, the non-tax collection is also healthy. Apart from the non-tax revenue, the collection is also seen as healthy, but in the case of disinvestment, it lagged behind the projected collection. For example, it has been projected to get the disinvestment amount of 61,000 crores, but India could be able to collect only 8,000 crores as the part of disinvestment proceedings. And at the same time, the excise duties as collection is also being reduced. So by comparing all this thing, and at the same time on the expenditure side, the central government's the phase of capital expenditure is also been slowed down for the last few months, and it will also slow down in the coming months because of the implementation of model code of conduct during the election time period. By considering all this, and at the same time, this year the GDP has, for the past 8 months, the GDP has grown at 8.6%, which is very less when compared to the projected 10.5%. But what the experts are saying is that despite such lesser capital expenditure and lesser economic growth when compared to the projected growth, the overall tax collection as well as the other non-tax collection has got improved. So it will not lead to enhanced fiscal deficit, or it will not lead to deficit which has been projected by the government in the past budget estimate. So this is what the news is. So let's look into what are the factors that has led to rise in the tax collection. First and foremost is the stable government policies. Second, it is the effective filing of IT return because of the ease of process as well as the more awareness for the people. And then increased corporate earnings led to increased corporate tax by the MNCs or the private organization. And then post-COVID recovery in the economies has also led to increased tax collection, and also the efficiency in the tax collection got increased because of enhanced adaptation of the technologies in the income tax as well as other tax collection agencies. So these are all the factors that has been responsible for the rise in tax collection. So let's look into the feature of good taxation system. If a taxation system need to be efficient, means then it need to be fair, and at the same time it need to be efficient, and at the same time it need to be simple so that a common individual could be able to access the taxation system, and then it need to be flexible rather than being rigid, and then the transparency as well as the accountability of the system need to get ensured. So these are all the things that is needed for the good taxation system. So this is what that thing is. So what are the things which we needed to be further aware of is, we should be aware of FRBM Act, its objective, structure as well as the function which it has provided. Secondly, we should also be aware of the mission Indradhanush, the objective for which it has been created, and what are all the schemes that has been implemented under this mission. Thirdly, we should also be aware of IBC 2016, that is Insolvency as well as Bankruptcy Code 2016. So these are all the things which we needed to be further aware of, and with this we have reached the end of this topic. Okay, let's move on to further another news. America's climate failure. So the news is related to the failure of America to support the climate change activities that has been happening around the global arena, despite they are the major contributor to the global emission. So this is what the news is about. Let's look into how the news is related to examination. Under prelims, the news is related to general issues on environmental ecology, biodiversity and climate change. Similarly, under mains, it has been related to GS paper 3 environment under a subtopic called conservation, environmental pollution, degradation and environmental impact assessment. So this is how the news is being related to examination. Let's look into the further explanation of the news. So the contribution made by the US is $17.3 million, which is very less when compared to other countries like Dubai, Germany, France, Italy, UK for the loss and damage fund. US has been the largest, holds the largest share of historical emission, and also at the same time US carries more responsibilities in climate action because of the climate change principle, where the developed countries who is responsible for the historical emissions need to take more accountability for the climate related action. And among the developed countries, US occupies the largest share in terms of emission. So the UNFCCC as well as the 2015 Paris Agreement stresses more about the developed countries' contribution. But what US has done is that US has lagged behind all the contribution or the efforts that has been undertaken in the climate action at the global level. See, not only it did not cut down the emission, it also done little to meet its financial as well as the technological obligation. It also provides certain restriction on transfer of technology to the developing countries for the climate mitigation and adaptation activities. And at the same time, it never ratified the Kyoto Protocol, which is very important from the perspective of LIMS, and therefore never abided by the emission reduction targets which was provided under the Kyoto Protocol. And despite the effort that has been made by the countries to formulate the Paris Agreement, this Paris Agreement negotiation was also being led by US only. But after quite some time, they withdrew from this agreement, and later they joined in the agreement. But the enthusiasm is very less when compared to the other countries while for implementing this Paris Agreement. And in terms of historical responsibility, despite China emitting much more in the last 15 years, the US continued to have the largest share historically, accounting for more than 20% of all carbon emission from 1850. And around 1990s, when the first international rules for the climate action was implemented, US accounted for nearly 30% of the historical emission. And in the principle of polluters pay, the developed countries as well as the industrial countries need to take the responsibilities for the climate mitigation activities. Those developed countries were formed under a separate grouping called as Annexure 1 countries under the United Nations Framework for Convention on Climate Change. But a recent assessment by the United Nations Framework for Convention on Climate Change shows that by 2020, when the Kyoto Protocol came to an end, the Annexure 1 countries have contributed to reduction in the greenhouse gas emission by 25% from 1990 levels. And among the developed countries, US only contributed 0.4% of reduction of global carbon emission when compared to the 1990 levels. And this is what the thing is, US still maintains that it has achieved the, or it is in the path to achieve the emission reduction target, but on at the ground level it is different thing, it has not been achieved. And at the same time, the targets that has been fixed by US is also modest. Despite being them the major contributor for the emission, the target of the US is struggling to meet its target of reduction of emission by 52% by 2030 on 2005 levels. So by converting this target level, by taking it as with a benchmark of 2019 levels, the US target is only 43%. So the US aims to achieve the greenhouse gas emission reduction by 43% by 2030 when 2019 is taken as benchmark. So which is very a meager amount when compared to the experts, what expert as well as the IPCC's organization target of 46% from 2019 levels. That is the 46% of reduction that has been needed from the global level to reduce with 46% need to be reduced from 2019 level by 2030 from the global level. So it is very much lesser than the global contribution itself. So this is what the thing is. And apart from it, US is acting against the equity as well as the justice principle. They wanted to break down the developed as well as developing countries stance in the in the Conference of Parties negotiation. They wanted to treat all the countries at the equal foot, which goes against the equities as well as justice principle, which under which principle only this convention has been formed. And at the same time, there has been many criticism that the Saudi Arabia is not attempting to prevent, is phase out of the is not attempting to phase out the coal because of its heavy phase out of the fossil fuel because of its heavy dependency on the fossil fuel. But when the data, if you look into the data, we could able to see that US is the country that produces most amount of the fossil fuels like oil, natural gas as well as coal, and the country's energy needs, that 80% of its energy needs are still dependent on the fossil fuels only, which is very higher when compared to countries like Saudi Arabia as well as India. And also at the same time, right now India's energy need, 27% of India's energy need has been met by the non-fossil fuels when compared to the US energy need, where it has where only 20% has been met by the non-fossil fuels. So we could able to see that India's contribution in terms of increased non-fossil fuel capabilities is way higher when compared to US, despite US being the major contributor historically. So this is what the things that has been happening around the phasing out of the coal production. And at the same time, what it has been said is that US has been providing meager amount of financial as well as technological resource needed for the climate mitigation activities, most importantly for the climate adaptation activities. And what the US government has recently announced that it will be providing $3 billion to the Green Climate Fund for the next 4 years, which is the largest sum by any country for the developing countries. And the Green Climate Fund's main aim is to raise fund for the developing countries. But when comparing this fund with the actual fund needed, there is still some gap is prevailing. So what the experts are saying is that this amount is very meager amount when compared to the actual need for the adaptation as well as the mitigation activities. So this is what the thing is. What need to be studied further is, we should be aware of what is United Nations Framework for Convention on Climate Change. We should also be aware of G20 climate action as well as the National Mission on Climate Change of India. So these are all the other areas which we needed to be further aware of, and with this we have reached the end of this topic. Let's move on to today's practice prelims question. So mentioned here is the today's practice prelims question. So students, those who are watching this session online, please do comment the option point for the question which you are seeing right now on the board. With this, we have reached the end of today's session. Please do like, comment, share as well as subscribe Ganesh IAS YouTube channel, so that you will be receiving the daily notification regarding the current affairs and any other important sessions that will be brought to you in the future by the Ganesh IAS Academy. Thank you.